Gotham Rules, Not Up for Debate. By Blueyeti. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. Bernard takes a new kid at Gotham under his wing, because there are so many ways for outsiders to muck up living in Gotham, aka an outsider perspective on Gothamite's weirdness. Day 262 of 365 days of suffering, but Gotham ups the ante for suffering. This fic is about 5,400 words and one chapter. This fic is rated teen and up audiences, and creator chose not to use archive warnings. As always, link to the fic is in the description. And on with the story. Morgan Keenly moved to Gotham 2 weeks into the first term, which was inconvenient as hell, but his moms did their best. But he wasn't expecting that starting at Gotham Academy was going to be much different from the other 4 schools he'd started at since middle school. His moms had always been a little pushy when it came to joining intellectual clubs, saying it was a good way for Morgan to integrate himself into a new school, again, without disrupting existing groups as much as an activity like band might. So that's what he'd done. He'd signed up for Gotham Academy's mock trial team by email before he had even arrived in the school. He had a flyer for the GSA, and might even join the after-school art club if it looked like they had enough people who took comics seriously to not be laughed at. Morgan knew how to start at a new school. He'd made it into an art form. Be careful with the first person to befriend you, in case they're a troll or an asshole or the school weirdo. Get noticed by a teacher or two, and know who in the admin staff to go to with problems. Get your feet into a few things all at once, so in case one group goes to shit, you can pretend you were never really interested in chess or ice hockey or history, and save face with everything else. Morgan wasn't sure if Bernard Dowd being the first person to befriend him was good luck or bad, but it was something. He met Bernard in his last class of his first day, when the boy put his hand up to be assigned partners in the chemistry lab, and then followed him out the door when the bell rang. "I saw your name was down for mock trial. The team hasn't even met yet this year, so I'll show you where it is. I'm new too. New to mock trial for this year. I wasn't in it last year," Bernard said, walking backwards down the hallway. "But my boyfriend said they could do with my perspective, since someone needs to be the voice of cynicism." "Is your boyfriend part of it as well?" Bernard shook his head. "He's too busy, and surprisingly hopeful. Not cynical enough, anyway. Not in my mind." "How, cynical do we need to be for mock trial? Does the group keep focusing on controversial laws?" Bernard shrugged. "I'm not sure if it's controversial to expect our local laws to reflect the lived reality of its citizens." Morgan nodded, like he was following what was obviously the middle point of an old argument that made sense to Bernard, and let Bernard introduce him to all the kids already gathered in the classroom. After a few weeks at school, Morgan had been in Gotham for long enough that he'd learned to pick out the real weirdos from the Gothamite weirdos from the Tim Drake-level bizarre ones. That kid was weird, regardless of if he was Bernard's boyfriend. Drake was weird in the Gothamite way that Morgan was learning to recognize, but also in a frenzied, underslept gremlin way, which was pretty familiar from the nerds of any number of schools he'd been at previously. That Bernard had dragged Morgan into the position of third wheel to a weird couple was still welcome, because, apparently, going anywhere by himself in Gotham wasn't advised for at least another 3 months of Bernard's intensive Survive Gotham training. Bernard had invited himself over to Morgan's place when they still had the moving boxes littering the living room, flopped on to Morgan's couch when they were playing Assassin's Creed, and given him the rundown on Gotham and Gothamites, since apparently being from New Jersey, and Florida, and Oregon, and NYC, among other places, wasn't enough to even give him an edge as a newcomer to Gotham. Okay, said Bernard. There's shit you need to know to survive Gotham Academy. Morgan rolled his eyes, because it's not like he was new at being a new kid in school. He'd lived in 7 cities in the last 10 years. He knows how new schools work, and how ruthless kids can be to a fresh face. Don't even think of dressing up for Halloween, Bernard said. Okay, Morgan said. But Halloween was in a few weeks, so that wasn't a stupid thing to mention. I don't have a good costume idea planned, anyway. No, seriously. You can't do that shit in Gotham. I have no idea how it's even a thing. Gothamites don't believe in it. Why does anyone do Halloween? Like, seriously. People let their kids dress up as clowns in the rest of the country. What the fuck is with that? So it's just Gotham doesn't really do Halloween? So I'd be the only person dressed up at school. Thanks for the advice, I guess. Bernard looked at him like Morgan was the one who was strange. The problem is that Gotham does Halloween with real blood. Most of our grade remember well, when we were kids, the Joker got... Fuck. Just don't make me talk about it. Well, you don't have to talk about it, Morgan said. But he added it to his mental list of Gotham shit to Google. The r/only in Gotham thread was already bookmarked, though after the first nightmare, he decided not to look at it before bed. He'd had to double-check sources for everything he read there, because it had seemed like a long-form troll, but the Washington Post and CNN had verified most of the really outlandish things. Anyway, Halloween is a bad idea. Don't do it if you don't want to give kids panic attacks. And no masks. If someone can't see your face, they're going to assume you're a serial killer and shoot first and ask questions never. Morgan nodded, focusing back on the video game. You'll probably be invited to a pollen party soon, Bernard said. I think Rowan's playing to host one soon, and I'll make sure you get an invite. Pollen party? Bernard said, his player moving into the next room. Sex pollen. Morgan spun around, his player dying tragically almost immediately. Sex pollen party? What the hell? Teenagers get together, expose themselves to a low dose of poison ivy's pheromones, and we use that to sort of inoculate ourselves against the real thing. Sex pollen, Morgan repeated. Well, not the real deal. It's an artificial type which Batman supplies to all the school districts. I guess Gotham has comprehensive sex ed. Yeah, it's only good enough as a prophylactic exposure to, hopefully get you to a safe place before you try to fuck a fire hydrant. But it's better than the absolute first time you're exposed being a full dose in public. Y'all actually do sex parties? On drugs? And Batman is your dealer? Yeah, Bernard said with a shrug. I've seen Euphoria. I bet the rest of the state does worse than us. You're fucking with me. Well, I've got a boyfriend, but if you prefer I help you through it, I'll ask Tim if he'd mind. The pollen is pretty awful if you're trying to ride it out alone, and almost everyone begs for contact. So it's much better if you sort out your no-goes list and stuff beforehand, and it's better if you trust the other person, even if it's only a little. I'm working on the assumption that you're trolling the new guy, so I'm not going to be showing up to a sex party in a Playboy bunny outfit so all your friends can laugh. Is that a Legally Blonde reference? Fuck yeah, I love Legally Blonde. I read a blog about how Elle Woods reads as autistic because female presentations of neurodiversity include a lot more people-pleasing behavior because of being socialized female. It was really interesting. Morgan wasn't sure what his face was saying, but Bernard turned to him and looked slightly concerned. I'm not trolling you, Morgan. I think you're normal and probably pretty cool and just... Gotham is a lot. I'm not saying you have to trust me, Morgan. I know we only just met, but I like you, and I hope you like me as well. I am going to Google everything you ever tell me. Good. Maintaining active skepticism is an excellent trait. I expect all my friends to be thorough researchers, or else we'll run out of things to talk about. Morgan rolled his eyes with a smile and focused back on the game. He could definitely have done worse than have Bernard as a friend. That was only the first unexpected revelation about Gotham that Bernard dropped on Morgan. Over the next 2 weeks at school, Morgan would have random questions or recommendations dropped on him throughout the day. Like when Bernard leant over during chemistry, when the teacher was writing something on the board. Is your gas mask Joker rated or just Scarecrow? My gas mask? Bernard rolled his eyes. Yeah, your gas mask. I haven't seen it. Joker rated will handle a higher level of corrosive in the gas, so if you can afford it, it's worth it. It's not even any heavier to carry around. I don't have a gas mask. Fuck. We're going shopping after class. I can't believe you haven't been fined yet. Fined? Yeah, of course. It's illegal to go out in public without a gas mask. Do we need to get some for your moms as well? Or, a few days later, Bernard met him in the hallway between class, dragging his half-asleep boyfriend behind him. Don't fuck with Damian Wayne today, Bernard said, voice low and urgent. I wasn't planning to fuck with anyone today. Well, don't fuck with Damian Wayne any other day. It's a terrible idea. He's got swords, Tim, the boyfriend, said rather distractedly, not looking up from his smartphone. Morgan hadn't really got a chance to know Tim, instead of just meeting him over lunch. It was strange. Morgan wasn't quite sure if Tim was actually enrolled in school or just came occasionally to hang out in lunch and harass one of the computer science teachers. Morgan didn't share any classes with him, but he also never seemed to have any books, often just carrying his phone or sometimes a fancy laptop in a satchel. And whenever other teenagers were bitching about their homework or teachers, Tim would be typing emails or looking over stuff. Things that looked important. Morgan figured that maybe Tim had been a senior last year and graduated from most classes and was either coming to hang out with Bernard at lunch because he could, or had one class he still needed to finish high school. The most he knew about Tim was that he carried around a thermos of espresso with the same dedication of an alcoholic to their hip flask, and was still barely conscious. Maybe he was enrolled, but spent most of the school day napping in a locker room somewhere. Presumably, he was more fun when it was just him and Bernard. But Bern hadn't invited him to anything, which was a small group, and Morgan wasn't up for going to a sex party in his first month in a new school. He couldn't verify that yet. Damian Wayne, the freshman who's the Wayne Enterprise kid? He brought swords to school? Fuck, the rich kids can get away with anything. Damian's not the Wayne Enterprise kid. That's Tim. Don't fuck with Tim either. Tim waved the hand which wasn't locked in Bernard's, just a few little fingers raised from the side of his coffee thermos. I thought your last name was Drake. Tim hummed in acknowledgement, with a bit of a shit-eating grin. Damian is Bruce Wayne's biological kid, but... Bernard gestured at Tim, smiling a proud and goofy grin. When someone talks about the Wayne Enterprises kid, they mean Tim. He was acting CEO for a year. Morgan looked over at Tim, and that smartphone that no teacher ever tried to confiscate. You're a teenager. Tim shrugged. How is that legal? Did you need to sign contracts and stuff? Emancipated minor, Tim said. Bernard looked up at him with a dopey, love-struck expression. Fucking Gotham. They let minors run gigantic companies, carried gas masks, and had sex parties. This city was so fucking weird. A few days later, the rumor had changed, and it was going around that you shouldn't fuck with Damian Wayne because he tamed a colony of feral penguins and was keeping them in a specially built ice rink under Wayne Manor. He does love animals, Tim has said. Penguins? Really? Don't you know about the Gotham penguin colonies? Morgan had been busy, okay? Trying to figure out what was real and what was nonsense in the mess of things he needs to know about Gotham. I've seen the signposts for tourists. I thought there was a penguin enclosure in Robertson Park for rich people reasons. Byrne looked at Morgan like he was an idiot, which wasn't fair, because it's not like Gotham was normal, and they weren't the weirdos. We've got the largest wild penguin population in the Northern Hemisphere. Penguins. In the wild. In the Northern Hemisphere. Fucking Gotham. Should I even ask how or why? A combination of Mr. Freeze and Penguin, obviously. There's a few native colonies, and the one in Robinson Park are even friendly. Well, less vicious. The ones in the sewers are having some sort of evolutionary arms race against the sewer crocodiles. So those ones, well, you should run. You do realize you live in a city with, comic book logic, right? So do you, Morgan. Yeah, but I'm planning to leave. I can't believe my mom's thought moving here was a good idea. We've got excellent infrastructure and a surprisingly high quality of life for the East Coast, as a cost of living analysis. Yeah, but you've got to be alive for it to benefit you. Bernard just shrugged, like that was of minor consideration. Did you finish the chem homework? I got stuck on question 11. About half an hour later, as they were sitting in on English class, Morgan had a realization and leant over to whisper at Byrne. The Goose First Penguin debate wasn't about the hockey teams? Bernard laughed. Penguin, the rogue, did steal the Pittsburgh Penguins and replace them with actual penguins once when they were playing an away match in Gotham. But actual birds? It's the Canada goose migratory season. It's pretty funny watching them try to fight against the established penguin colonies. There's betting rings. The teacher raised one eyebrow at the whispering, and Morgan shut up. Sometimes he just didn't want to know more. Mock trial itself was amazingly weird. Instead of the usual moderately controversial topics of state law and rather mundane mock cases about theft or assault, the whole thing was Gotham edition. Morgan was learning far too much about how intensely fucked up the entire city was. The first case they worked on was if mandatory daily archery practice should be enforced within city limits. Apparently, that was still a law on the books, carried over from English common law, but still relevant, because all citizens expected to be attacked at all times. When Morgan had looked over at Bernard, who was pretty nerdy in any other context, who shrugged and agreed that he had been in self-defense lessons since he was 4, because his parents weren't idiots. The strongest counter-argument to enforcing archery practice seemed to be, Batman doesn't like Green Arrow very much. Can't we have mandatory battering practice instead? The next was about if it was going out to fight in a uniform or being publicly recognized under a known pseudonym that made a vigilante into an official vigilante, and not just an asshole with an anger problem. The related question of whether official vigilantes were immune from prosecution from injuries given to suspects who were caught mid-crime lasted much longer than the first part. Morgan started keeping a list of debate questions he could throw at his next debate club, probably when Mom's contract was up and they moved to another city. Are teenage sex parties moral? Should civilians be obligated to murder terrorist serial killers dressed as clowns if the opportunity arises? Is maintaining multiple identities automatically a form of fraud, or just good practice in a city as fucking weird as Gotham? Gotham was the strangest place he'd ever been, with the weirdest social rules. Morgan was damn lucky that Byrne had taken pity on him that first day of school, because he'd probably have been eaten by sewer crocodiles without some help. Literally, because Gotham was just like that. He felt like he was starting to get the hang of the city when one of Morgan's debate suggestions got shortlisted. Would Gotham's rogues' problems be solved by strict application of OSHA guidelines, given the number of accidental enroguing of normal citizens by application of unsecured chemical vat? The Gothamites laughed, and Byrne started pulling statistics, and that felt like Morgan had found a way to get himself accepted by the nerdy thinkers of Gotham. Morgan usually walked home from school, since it was only 25 minutes, 20 if he left out of the back doors. Sometimes Tim's butler drove him home, but it wasn't worth catching the bus. The corridor between the back room and his locker wasn't a well-used part of the school, according to Byrne. Not since the science lab down there exploded last year, and the investigation as to if it was connected to Blast Mask lasted long enough they didn't have time for repairs before this school year. That was Byrne's thought as to why no one used it as a shortcut. But Morgan thought the big reason was that it was only useful for people who walked, since the train and buses and cars picked up on the front side of the school. The second reason was that it was a little eerie, since he walked past all the memorial boards for kids from Gotham Academy who died before they left the school. They had died in so many ways. Suicide by theotoxin, a collapsing bridge, caught in the crossfire of a gang war, contaminated water, the chemical fallout from an exposure at Ace Chemical, missing, last seen near a Mr. Freeze attack, assumed frozen and shattered in the resulting fight. Byrne had commentary about those as well, or at least explanations which expanded on the little plaques. She was a great chess player. Terrible hair, though. And I know the dates are different, but he was on the kidnap bus as well. He was just in a coma for a few months before his mom came to terms and turned off the life support. Beth Rossi, she's a senior this year, has his lungs, though, so that's cool. She had a chronic lung condition from Joker toxin exposure as a child. It was a long and organized stretch of hallway. The stone walls were crowded with letter-sized school photos of each dead kid, all the way to the ceiling. The newer ones with little white plaques next to them, like they were portraits in a museum. It was in chronological order, the earliest back in 1935. Nice metal plaques for them, and etchings or portraits for only the occasional kid, until it moved on to photographs. There were even a few wooden boards covered in gold-painted names, ranks, and dates to account for kids who had died in the big wars after leaving school, but before they'd had much time for an adult life either. There was even a secondary list of names on the WW1 and WW2 plaques, obviously added later, filled with names that looked Germanic, Italian, and Russian. Byrne saw him tracing over those once, taking in the differences. Yeah, they added the boys who fought on the wrong side as well, but they only put them up when most everyone was dead. There was a thing a few years ago, when there were a few kids who got caught up in a Two-Face plot and died. No one wanted to exclude them because they were the bad guys, if only because there's so many ways you could be blackmailed or coerced into working for one of the big rogues. So they decided to add the kids who went to Europe and fight on the losing side, just to be fair. But they were fighting for the Nazis. Byrne shrugged. It's not like they were choosing that out of well-informed position. They were American kids with German family who thought they were fighting for the fatherland. Propaganda is, well, it's effective, isn't it? Morgan nodded. Most of the time, Gothamites are crazy. Thank you. Byrne grinned. And then sometimes you're crazy in a way which is actually pretty generous to other people's crazy. Obviously, joining up with a neo-Nazi cult is a no-go, though. Fuck those assholes. The last 20 yards were bare, waiting for new deaths, already anticipating the photos to come. Most of the time, Morgan just walked past them all, inoculated to the long list of kids who would be adults or grandparents or dead of old age, if they'd gotten out of school. Sometimes, especially if Byrne was walking with him, they took it slow, and Morgan asked questions. This one is odd. Natural causes. Well, a natural accident instead of being murdered anyway. A skiing accident in Europe. That's practically normal. Except for the European Alps being a bit bougie, I guess. Byrne looked over his shoulder and shook his head. Jason Todd was Bruce Wayne's adopted kid. Well, one of them, obviously. I'm pretty sure he was kidnapped by the Joker and killed. Morgan looked at the photo of the kid. He was smiling, a few zits on the edge of his jaw, and some fuzzy first mustache hairs on his upper lip. You always think it's a conspiracy. Obviously. This city is corrupt as hell. Assuming it's always something bigger is just good self-preservation. He might have just been skiing, though. Byrne twisted his face. I asked Tim. I couldn't ask Mr. Wayne or Mr. Alfred, obviously. But Tim didn't deny it. Okay. There was probably something hinky. Byrne nodded his agreement. Tim was a sarcastic shit most of the time, but he didn't mislead Bernard. Byrne looked at the photo of Jason Todd, which looked just like all the rest on this corridor, nothing to mark him out as different from the rest of them, even though he was the kid of the biggest donor to the school and the city. Then he touched Photo Jason's hair, like he wanted to smooth it back. Morgan stood back, pretending to look at Abigail Smart, who had been caught up in the crossfire between Riddler goons and Batman. Bernard probably had known Jason Todd, even if it was only through the newspaper, because they do like to follow the Wayne kids in surprisingly respectful ways. Maybe through stories from Tim or Damien or the other Wayne kids. He was Tim's older brother, but he died at 15 and would be younger than Tim now. He was dead, and the Waynes couldn't even be honest about his death for media reasons, to not give the Joker such a public victory, to protect Tim and Damien from kidnapping attempts. Miss Keenly, I've come to take Morgan out to a party, Byrne said, ignoring Morgan sitting at the kitchen table to speak directly to his ma. You have? Morgan asked. Of course I have. You need to get out. He needs to get out, doesn't he, Miss Kay? Morgan's ma laughed and waved a hand in acceptance. Go forth and be cool, kiddo. But homework? Morgan asked in vague confusion. It's Friday. Go have fun. Come on, Morgan, Byrne said. This is your third chance, and it's being run by Red Robin, so you know it's legit. Fuck, really? Bernard grinned. Not if you don't want to, but I've chatted to Tim about it, and he doesn't mind if you need that. Handies will probably be enough, though. Tim's coming too? That makes it even weirder that you're offering to, help me out. Nah, there's something he's got to do for Bruce Wayne, I think. Just us and whatever a few dozen kids still need some exposure or a top-up. And Red Robin, obviously. but I'm pretty sure Batman exposes the Robins to something absolutely top-notch as inoculation. So he'll probably just lurk in the corner, making sure everything is as consensual as it can be, and folks respect safe words and establish negotiations. But, I mean, I like you, but not to be all, is this gay, but, I'm pretty sure I'm straight. Will it even work? Bernard shrugged. Sexuality is pretty damn fluid once Ivy's pollen gets involved. Ugh. So she'll seduce a gay man just because she can? We're all pretty sure she's gay, Byrne said with a shrug. There's a whole thing with Harley Quinn, and she's pretty misandrist. She definitely doesn't respect or even like men. So, gay man feeling straight is hardly the most rapey thing her pollen can do, but it's pretty indiscriminate. Morgan looked towards the back room, where he could hear his moms quietly talking about whatever fantasy show they'd been watching. Could Ivy Pollen make them go out and fuck men? Fucking hell, this city was the absolute worst. How can they think this was normal? I hate this city. Bernard nodded. Now you're getting it. Morgan grinned back at him. At least Byrne didn't pretend Gotham was normal. Well, when he remembered. Tim was another story. The kid had no idea how the outside world was meant to work, and just blinked at Morgan with a "Normies are so weird" expression whenever Morgan said something totally sensible, like that it was weird that sexual things were rated higher than violence in movies. Bernard bit his lip, looking down at Morgan with concern. I like you, okay? And I want you to be safe. I know this is weird and all, but I'm not tricking you. I know you're not, Morgan agreed, because he had spent a few days deep diving into the validity of pollen parties in Gotham, and it seemed legit and probably worthwhile. Still weird as anything, but at least he wasn't the butt of a joke, unless it was an exceedingly complicated Truman-esque one. Welcome to Gotham, I guess, Morgan said. Welcome to Gotham, Bernard echoed, grinning fairly, in that way that all Gothamites managed if you picked the right topic. It was so damn weird. How could the city make them all smile the same? Low-level exposure to Joker toxins at a young age, maybe? If Gotham U wasn't a hotbed of rogue activity in the research departments, he'd send a few emails to the chemistry department to ask. Where are you applying for college? Morgan asked at their table in study hall, as they passed around college flyers and looked at smiling faces of carefully diverse groups of faces, backlit by the sky. Why did all these colleges hire the same person to do their brochure? They all looked entirely interchangeable, except for color scheme and their sport mascots, which was only useful if you bothered with those pages or were expecting a sports scholarship. Gotham U, said Byrne, scribbling something in the notes of his textbook and pushing the pile of brochures past him. Anything else? Byrne shrugged. Just Gotham. I know we're meant to want to leave our weird-as-hell home city. That's a pretty normal thing, you know. Outsiders do that all the time. Lots of people move away from home for college. Really? I thought that might have been one of those Gotham things. Nah. In the outsider world, it's mostly about going to good colleges and maybe about separating from their parents and getting more opportunities than small towns, obviously. Morgan rolled his eyes. He hadn't been here 6 months, and he was already calling the real world the outsider world. They acclimatize their citizens to crazy fast. Huh. Okay. That makes sense, I guess. But you don't want to leave Gotham? Byrne shrugged, doodling in his margins again. I know it's a mess, but it's a mess I understand. Maybe I can do some good if I stay. Yeah? You can, Morgan said. But I'm getting the fuck out of here. Tim pushed a stack of California pamphlets. Is the West Coast far enough? Morgan stayed late because the mock trial team was preparing for an inter-school bout with Bristol High School. There was some sort of rivalry going on between the schools, which might have something to do with someone sabotaging a baseball mascot 20 years ago. But Morgan couldn't figure out the details. It was their first match of the term, and there were some egos on the line. He had wandered home with his headphones on, most of his mind on his chem homework, because he felt he was so close to getting it. If only he just kept looking at it sideways. It was already dark, but that was to be expected, since it was January, and it wasn't like it ever got dark in Gotham. The clouds and pollution always hung so low that the scattered light from streetlights and windows kept the sky a murky, deep brown. Murky brown, just like usual. Murky orange tendrils joining the mist, hovering in a glow around the lampposts. It was pretty, in a Gotham sort of way. The attack was quick, and nothing to do with Morgan. Men in masks dropping in behind an armored truck that really shouldn't be parked on a street at 5 p.m., out of place. Fuck. Masks. Joker masks. Morgan dropped down on his heels, hoping he was out of sight behind a parked car. Morgan had been paying attention. He slung his backpack forward so he could get at the zip, scrambling for the gas mask he'd been carrying for months. He had practiced under Bernard's watchful eye until he could get the thing over his face in one movement, tightening the straps while another held the seal in place. He wiggled his head to check it wasn't moving at all, running a finger along the seal. Morgan scrambled for cover on his hands and knees. There was an alley about 20 yards back the way he came. He could cut through there, get back to one of the main thoroughfares. He kept his head down, breathing tight, and then looked up. One of them had seen him. He was stalking towards him with a wobbly gait, weaving around the sidewalk. His legs long and getting longer, with far too many knees bending each way so each leg looked like it was its own rattling spine. The Joker clown was laughing. It echoed so strangely through the clown's mask, like it was underwater, or under bubbling goop of slime, the laughs popping as they reached the surface. He should get up. He should run. His lungs were already burning, like he'd been running for hours and hours, running into the mist until he could lose them all behind. Run! He was frozen, watching the clown come closer. No, Morgan begged. Please! The clown knocked him down. The school memorial was cookie cutter from every other one, and over in 20 minutes. Bernard was the one to hang Morgan Keenley's photo on the memorial wall. The maintenance guy and Morgan's homeroom teacher led them down, with Tim lingering at Burns' right shoulder. I know you tried, Burns said, after he'd hung Morgan's smiling face on the wall, with his big eyes and the little downturn of his uneven mouth. I'm sorry, Morgan. I thought I could keep you safe. I liked you, and you were barely even an outsider anymore. Yeah, Tim agreed. I know you tried, but we can't control Gotham. And that's all for this one. Sorry for no warning on that ending. I don't tend to read things with unhappy endings, but this one fucking hit me like a truck. And like, you need the like, oh, it's penguins, feral penguins in Gotham. Haha, funny. To really feel the impact of that one, like, oh my god, when I finally got to the section with, did Morgan's final appearance, my chest literally got so tight and my heart rate was beating just wild. I actually got short of breath reading. I'm not sure if it comes through, but oh my god. I read this fic for the first time about an hour ago. I've been recording for 40 minutes, so about 20 minutes ago, I probably started reading this for the first time. And just, oh my god. This is just, I don't even know what to say. I read it, and before I got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh, this is good points. This is perfect. Yeah, crack treated seriously. That's one of the tags. Crack treated seriously. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, this is fun. This is good points. I've been enjoying this. Then when I got to the final paragraph bit, the final section where they're hanging his photo on the memorial wall, I knew in an instant that this fic was not gonna leave me for a long, long time. Like, in that instant, I just knew. And I was like, oh, that was a good fic. I'm totally not crying right now. And I closed out. I bookmarked it, kudosed it, first of all, immediate bookmark. But I closed out and I went to, read something else. It is bedtime. I am having reading time. It is a good time. But within 30 seconds, I couldn't stop just thinking about the moment. Just the moment. It is the moment, and how I was feeling at that time. So I went back on the fic, I checked some of the comments, all of them screaming about the ending. Because of course. And I felt mostly satisfied. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got it out of my system, I'm good. I started reading another fic. It seems like a good fic. I only got a minute or two in before I noticed I was zoning out and thinking about this fic again. So I went back on the fic and I myself left a comment because I'm like, oh yeah, this'll get me. I'll be totally fine. But then I was staring at it and I'm like, this is really good. Maybe I can make a podfic out of this. So I went and checked the author's profile and they had blanket permission. Don't even have to wait for a response for asking if I can. And I couldn't help myself. I got out of bed, I set up my microphone, and I started recording. It is 1 a.m. I have my bonnet on my hair. It is bedtime. I didn't even take it off before I started recording. I'm just in bedtime mode, but I couldn't, this was gonna worm its way in my brain even if I didn't record a podfic. Hopefully this has settled me enough to either go to bed or read something else for now. But anyway, I have rambled a long time about this fic, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was as much of an experience for you as it was for me. Oh boy, anyway, yeah. That is all for now. As always, the link in the description to the original fic is there. Go leave a kudos, go leave a comment, whatever you can emotionally. I'm sure the author appreciates it. Anyway, that is all for this time, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. My God, what an experience.